Welcome back to Actionable Intelligence. I'm Eric Greitens. Well, you remember the Covington Catholic kids? And you probably remember the way the mainstream media lied and misreported the facts about the encounter between Kentucky teenager Nicholas Sandmann and Nathan Phillips. If you do, you probably also remember that teen sought over $800 million in various lawsuits. Well, earlier this year, we learned of major settlements from the Washington Post and CNN for their role in spreading misinformation. Well, joining us now is one of the lawyers who worked hard not just fighting for the Covington Catholic teens in the court of law, but also in the court of public opinion. Robert Barnes is a trial attorney of Barnes Law LLP. He's got many high-profile wins in civil, criminal, constitutional cases. Robert, it's so good to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So, Robert, first, earlier in the day, we were speaking with Alan Dershowitz about this case coming out of Pennsylvania, which is now making its way to the Supreme Court. Give us your sense, please, for where the Trump team's legal arguments stand and the likelihood of success in this case that's going to be coming up before the Supreme Court.
Yes, so there's several different Pennsylvania cases that will be pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, more that are going there. There's a state Supreme Court case that's been appealed there.
Yes.
There's in fact, two different state Supreme Court cases that have been appealed there. There's a Third Circuit case that's going up there. Who knows how many more will go up there due to some of the crazy rulings that have come out of the Pennsylvania courts. All of them have a chance. The Supreme Court, just for the same reasons in Bush v. Gore, they said they can take any case, even a state case, if it involves the presidential election, because that impacts the federal statutes, that impacts the U.S. Constitution, that impacts the Electors Clause, that impacts safe harbor statutes, that impacts, of course, due process and equal protection quite frequently. So if the court wants to take it, they absolutely can. They need to take it because the issues and the risks that are present, you have courts saying crazy things that make us look like a joke in terms of election integrity around the world. Like you have a right to observe, but that doesn't include a meaningful right to actually observe. So that's one. I mean, saying that if you file suit after the election, it's too late, but if you file suit before the election, it's too early. I mean, these are just crazy doctrines that make a mockery out of election law, make a mockery out of our election process. So I hope the Supreme Court does take the case. They clearly have the authority to do so. The question is whether they have the political will to do so.
Yeah, and Robert, break down for our viewers from your perspective, two of the big constitutional issues that are going to come before the Supreme Court is this basic idea of equal protection, that everybody in the United States should be treated equally under the law, which means that your vote needs to be treated equally under the law. And then also this constitutional issue where the Constitution is very clear that it is only the state legislature that sets the time, place, and manner of elections. Walk our viewers through those two big issues, please.
Absolutely. So in Pennsylvania, you've had secretaries of state make up their own rules. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania make up its own rules. Local election boards make up their own rules. The legislature pass rules that are in contradiction with the legislature's own rules under the state constitution. So you've had some we've had an election like none we've ever witnessed before in the history of the United States, and they all impact constitutional issues because depending on where you happen to live in the state, your vote is treated differently. Depending on whether or not the one set of rules from prior to 2019 or a different set of rules after 2019 that seem to contradict the Constitution are in play, also impacts whether you can vote correctly and constitutionally. So all of these issues are impacted, and equal protection says you can't have your vote diluted by one set of standards being applied in one county and a different set of standards being applied in another county. This is part of the problem in Bush v. Gore. That's an equal protection violation. There's also voter dilution claims that anytime anybody gets to vote illicitly or by a different legal standard in a different jurisdiction, that's an illegal vote within your state, that dilutes your legal vote. And that's supposed to be a constitutional claim. There is on top of that the fact the legislature is supposed to exclusively decide how the presidential elections take place while abiding by their state constitution and how they go about doing so. There's multiple issues in Pennsylvania concerning that. And then, of course, there's also the election day clause that says we're supposed to have one election day, not election days and weeks and months as took place in Pennsylvania.
Right, and then Robert. So we've talked with our viewers a lot about what's happening in Pennsylvania specifically. Lots of attention on those cases, but you also have cases that are still moving in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Nevada, in Arizona. Talk with our viewers, if you would, please, about what you see as the most important cases outside of Pennsylvania that are also moving forward.
I think in all of those jurisdictions, you have a common problem, which is that they discarded the election security safeguards that we've always had. And historically, if there's any kind of a legal vote that gets cast, that dilutes your lawful vote, and you're supposed to have a right to a remedy. And you have a lot of these courts coming up with creative doctrines to play Pontius Pilate and avoid making a meaningful ruling or even hearing the evidence. And and here's the key fact, folks. If the signature match check was actually done the way some of these elected officials claim it was done, even though it's belied by the fact that Kanye was knocked off the ballot because Democrats were able to strike off almost half of his signatures, and yet purportedly our signature match check produced 1/100th of 1% of rejections, that doesn't make sense. Right. So I think in this context, the uniformal provision that can give Trump enough ballots, if they meaningfully enforce the signature match check in ways it's been enforced before, or in ways it was enforced in this cycle towards nominating petitions to get on the ballot, then Donald Trump wins the election, period. The question is, will the courts force the elected officials to allow an independently confirmed signature match check to occur? That's pending in Arizona. They just got a right to sample some of the signature match checks. All of these states, including Georgia, have refused to allow anyone to check the signatures. If there's no problem with the signatures, why are they all so scared to allow anyone to look at them?
Yeah, and we've actually had on this program, and we've talked about very specific cases of individuals who were in Tennessee. They'd moved from Arizona, and then they found that the record showed that they had voted in Arizona, and they've come out and said, I didn't vote in Arizona, and yet the state of Arizona was saying that not only did you vote, but that you had a verified signature vote. So there are clearly problems there. Now, Robert, what do you, just from a legal perspective again, let's talk about evidence, because one of the things that the mainstream media keeps saying is, despite the fact that there's no evidence, there's no evidence, there's no evidence. I mean, we've had on this program, and we've talked with people who've signed sworn affidavits alleging that they were ordered to participate in widespread fraud. To me, that's the very definition of evidence when you have people who are signing these affidavits. But give us your legal perspective about what constitutes evidence, and that kind of refute this mainstream media narrative that there is no evidence.
There's really two categories. One is the evidence that you're citing. The primary form of evidence is testimonial evidence. It's usually circumstantial. And there is more evidence of election irregularities, illegal voting, and fraud, in fact, occurring in this election than in the history of American elections. You're talking about now thousands of affidavits from thousands of witnesses across multiple jurisdictions, across multiple states, of sworn testimony under penalty of perjury. So you have record-setting evidence, and that's part one. And then part two is what Professor Turley pointed out, that in an election fraud context, your main evidence is going to be in the possession of the state. You can't, unless if it's amazing. They're saying, oh, you can't prove the signature match didn't occur because we won't let you check the signatures. You can't prove there's something wrong with the ballots because we won't let you look at the ballots, even though the ballots have all now been digitized in many of these states. Georgia's Secretary of State promised the whole state he would publish all the ballots to the entire world, yet he has not yet published a single ballot to the entire world. Let's see if these ballots have some abnormalities or irregularities in them, if they're weirdly marked only for Biden, if some of the barcode numbers or serial numbers at the bottom seem strangely out of order, given the testimony that the Thomas More Society has developed of postal workers confirming that they were delivering mail, but it turns out they were delivering signed ballots from one state to another. Well, let's take a look at these ballots. Let's take a look at these signatures. That's where the best evidence is. If there's no evidence of fraud, why are they hiding the evidence from the world?
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that. And let's also go back and touch on, I think you make a really important point about how much evidence there is, because everybody recognizes that in any human process there are going to be imperfections. There's never been a presidential election in the history of the country where there hasn't been some fraud of some kind that happens somewhere. But talk again about the scale of the evidence that we're looking at here in 2020, and if you could please compare that to what we've seen in the past.
So in the past, usually the only evidence to question a presidential election outside of, we could go back to 1960 and times like that where there was substantial evidence had they pursued it. But in modern times, and like Al Gore and other cases, they had no evidence of irregularities or fraud. They only had evidence of undercounted ballots.
Right.
In 2016, all they had were statistical anomalies. That was it. They had no evidence of whistleblowers from monitors, from observers, from mailbox workers, from postal workers, from delivery workers, from election observers. With all of that evidence, we have literally thousands of witnesses who are putting themselves under the subject of criminal punishment if they're lying, giving evidence in state after state after state from all across the spectrum, including Democrats that are testifying, independents that are testifying, people who voted for Joe Biden who are swearing to evidence under oath. And what they're saying in all of these cases is they saw extraordinary irregularities throughout these elections. And one of the things the media's done a good job of gaslighting people on, the legal standard is not fraud. All you have to show is illegal votes were cast or systemic irregularities occurred. You don't have to occur that they intended to defraud. All that matters is, did illegal votes get counted that are bigger than the margin of victory? And we have that by multiple methods and multiple means from Matt Brainerd's statistically significant evidence in every single swing state at a level we've never had it before.
Well, folks, again, thank you so much. We appreciate you, Robert, coming on the show. We look forward to having you on again. We are going to continue to follow this for you right here at Actionable Intelligence. Stay with us. We're going to be right back in just a minute.